Here, just off air with Ciara Kelly on Lunchtime Live. We were taking your questions on air, and as usual, we're on Facebook Live now taking the questions we didn't get to on air, but there is time to get some in. Any money questions you have. Before we start today, I'm going to just tell you about an enough.ie seminar we have coming up. We really well attended the last day. It was actually a full house the last day, and I think it's 16th of November, but have a look at enough.ie and you'll see the seminar there. Well, let's jump in with the first question.
Okay, so the first one comes in from Dave. So I have a work pension and just wondering if you can take out a lump sum when retiring with all the pension plans.
Yeah, so you have a pension and you're wondering about your lump sum when you retire. So the rules are actually really straightforward. There's two ways you can go at retirement when it comes to lump sums. One way is that you can look at how many years service you have with your company, and the magic number here is 20 years. If you have 20 years or more with the company you work for, well, then you should be able to take out 1.5 times whatever your final salary is as a lump sum. And that lump sum comes out. The first 200,000 of any lump sum is tax-free. The next 300,000 of any lump sum is subject to a special rate of 20% tax. So that's one route. If you have 20 years service, you can go 1.5 times your salary and get a lump sum out, and 200,000 tax-free, 300,000 at 20%. The other route is you add up all your pension pots and you take a quarter of it out as a lump sum. So to keep the maths simple and make the maths big, if you have €800,000 in the pot and all of your pots, you can take €200,000 out, and in that case you get 200,000 out tax-free. But if you had $1 million in your pot, you'd get $250,000 out, 200 tax-free, and then 20% on the other 50. So it's the same rules in terms of 200 tax-free and 300 at 20%. The maximum lump sum you can get out is €500,000. So yes, there is still options to be able to get tax-free lump sums at retirement when you retire, and then there's a lower rate on the next bit that you get out.
Okay, so this comes in from Aidan. So where should I go to start my pension? I'm 28 and looking for high risk to start, then 5 years, for 5 years, then medium.
You're 28 and you're going to go high risk for 5 years and then go medium. Why? Why don't you just go high risk for 25 years and then go medium if that's what the plan is? We did some maths actually on air with Ciara where we talked about with a 60-40 no-brainer portfolio, there's a 25% chance that in a year from now that's going to be down. That when you look at it, you put the money in and there's a 25% chance it'll be down. 5 years, there's only a 2% chance it's going to be down. 7 years, there's never been a 7-year period where it's been down. You're 28 years of age. You have another 37 years to go before you retire. This is the time to load up on the risk, take all the risk. Now, I'm not talking about stupidity. I'm talking about investing. I'm not talking about betting. And you take on a whole pile of risk at the moment and you invest and you forget. You are not touching this money for probably maybe 30, 32 or 37 years or even longer. So you don't worry about it going up and down. In fact, when you're putting new money into a pension or a savings plan that invests in stocks and shares and that type of stuff, when you're doing that, you're actually ideal opportunity is that you see it going down all the time because you're putting new money into it all the time. So it's a little bit like some people get worried when they see their pension pot going down. Imagine you walked into a car garage today and the car you wanted to buy was €50,000 and you went home tonight and you said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. That makes sense. And I'm going to buy that car for €50,000. And you walked into the garage the next day and the guy says to you, listen, or the girl says to you, listen, that car you were looking at yesterday, it's just dropped in value. It's only €30,000 now. What do you think you'd do? Most people would still buy the car because it's still the same car that was there yesterday. It's just €20,000 cheaper. What happens when people put money into pensions is they put the money in, it drops in value. So with the shares that were costing you €1 are now costing you 50 cents. And you say, oh, I'm not going to put any more money into that. It makes no sense. So it's the only time where logically we think it's the right thing to do to buy things when they're expensive and not buy them when they're cheap. You have a long time horizon. I would say to you, invest with high risk, leave it going, forget about it, hold your nerve, expect every 3 to 5 years it's going to go down by about 30% on average, maybe a bit more, and then just ride it out. And maybe there's some argument to be said, depending on what you're going to do at retirement, that you might turn the volume of risk down as you approach retirement. I'm talking about in the last 5 years. I'm not a big fan of that, but some people do really agree with it, and that's the time you might consider making a change. Be honest, it's all the way to 100 you're looking at. So retirement age isn't this big wall that you have to get the investment right at. I hope that makes a lot of sense. A lot of information there.
Okay, so Mark wants to know, can you advise if a 19-year-old student can start a pension? He has a part-time job but doesn't earn enough to pay tax.
Yeah, a 19-year-old student who doesn't earn enough to pay tax could start a pension, but it wouldn't make any sense because the whole idea of putting money into pension, the difference between a pension plan and a savings plan is that a savings plan you do from your after-tax income. So to put €100, you're a higher rate taxpayer. To put €100 into a savings plan, you have to earn 200, pay 100 quid in tax and put 100 quid in. To put €100 into a pension, even if you're a higher rate taxpayer, you put the €100 in and you get €40 back in tax. So it costs you 60 to put 100 in instead of 200 to put 100 in. The point I would make though is that if you're not paying tax, there's no benefit because the money goes away and you're not getting any of it back until you hit retirement anyway. So that person would actually be better off saving it. But don't discourage them from thinking about their their pension long term. There's no reason why they can't save it now for the next couple of years until a point where they're actually paying tax, and then start using the savings to top up the pension and to maximise the amount they're allowed to put into pension and get the tax relief at that stage. So it's just a different way of doing it, but it's not worth putting it in just now. Accumulate the money up, and when they're at a point where they are paying tax, then let them put the money in and get the tax relief at that point.
Okay, so Kieran asks, with negative interest on savings, where would be a good place to invest a pension lump sum?
Okay, it's all pension related, and that's probably because Ciara mentioned that we're coming up to tax and pension deadlines, so it's great to get the pension questions in. So where the question, sorry, you got diverted there. The question was, where should I put my pension money given that tax rates or given that interest rates are so poor? Basically was the question, not right, Nessa? Yeah. Okay, so again, it depends on your age, it depends on everything else, but this is a long-term investment, and it's the one I'll always go back to when we're doing Facebook Live or doing it on air. It's the 60-40 portfolio. You put 60% in shares and you put 40% in bonds, and that's your no-brainer portfolio. You make sure it's really well spread out. Like a typical investment portfolio we put together wouldn't be unusual for you to have 13,500 different companies, exposure to 13,500 different companies. And this is a really, really interesting point because some people say, I lost money on my pension or I got wiped out completely. I bet you if you looked at those people, they were probably invested across a few banks and maybe a couple of construction companies, and it happened to be 2008. And they had like 5 companies that they were invested in, or 3 companies, or not 13,500. 13,500 is well spread out, and it's spread out across the world. Brexit is all over the place at the moment. It's driving us all mad, I think. Well, it's certainly driving me mad. And what we're kind of sucked into is in Ireland, because we're so exposed to the UK, we believe the entire financial world is about to fall apart because of Brexit. The reality is that when we put a portfolio together, the shares that we invest in, 94% of them are not in the UK. So only 6% of the world's biggest companies are in the UK. 94% of the investment world couldn't care less about Brexit. Now, it might have problems for Europe. It's not going to have problems for the US. Certainly on the financial side, it's not going to have problems in the US. And we need to think bigger than just what's being bombarded at us at the moment. When you're investing in pension, you spread it out as far as and wide as you can, and you sit back and you allow it to go up and down, and you don't react when it does.
Okay, so this comes in from a guy named Paul. So I'm the sole earner in my family, and we're finding it extremely difficult to make ends meet on one income. Is there anything I could do tax-wise, or are you aware of any welfare benefits that one income families can avail of? He earns about 40 grand a year.
Yeah, there is. It depends on how many kids you have. There's a thing called a family income supplement. If you have a look at the consumer advice, yeah, it'll come back to me in a minute because I use it all of the time. Citizens Information. Have a look at the Citizens Information website, and you should. It's FIS. It's called Family Income Supplement. And if you've got a few kids and you're the only earner, there is a top up that you can get to your salary because you're considered to be below a certain threshold that they feel that you need support on it. That's one of them. If you're really struggling hard, I wonder where the money is going out. Is it rent? Is it mortgages? Is there loans in the background? If it's any of the loans or mortgages and it's difficult times, I would be talking to your bank and talking to the people who you owe money to, and see if you can restructure that. If things are really, really bad and there's a lot of loans in the background, I'd be considering talking to a PIP, a personal insolvency practitioner. It does sound like things are difficult. 40 grand with, does it say actually how many kids there are? Just one child. Okay, and then you see, like,
they said they've sold their car and they've reduced their outgoings, but it's like rising insurance and diesel. Okay. Heating costs, general cost of living. Okay, so it's all general cost, and you've taken the move to sell your car, and you're doing all the other things that you can. It does sound to me like I would even go into the social welfare,
themselves, go in and meet them in person. There should be someone that you can hook up with there and just explain the circumstances, explain where you are, and making ends meet is a difficult one to do when there's plenty of money coming into the house, but if you're really up against it, it can be really hard, and you can really get in on your mind. So just be careful of yourself and make sure you're talking to the right people, but certainly talk to anybody you owe money to and ask them, can they reduce the repayments or stretch them out over a longer period of time to reduce them. You will find when you engage with those people it makes a massive difference. Your cost of living stuff, have a look at Kira and I have done it a couple of years in a row where we if you have a look at enough.ie, I know it's the second time I've mentioned enough, but have a look at enough.ie. I have a thing there that we've done 2 years in a row with Kira where we said I'm going to try and save €1,000 in 60 minutes by switching. And there's 2 articles up there 2 years in a row. They're actually a couple of years old now, but 2 years in a row where we jumped from one, and it gives you loads of tips on how you can cut back on your costs in relation to just your utility bills and your ESB, your electricity, and your all the different bills, and how you can move it around and save some money. And I think the second year we did it, more or less both years, we saved about €3,000 in 60 minutes, €3,000 a year in 60 minutes. So it's a really popular it's a really popular article on the website, but that will give you a few tips. But just mind yourself, that's a difficult position to be in, and make sure you go and talk to your social welfare people and go and talk to your banks as well.
Okay, so the last question is, I've just received a small early retirement lump sum. Where would be the best place for me to invest it but still have access to it in an emergency?
Okay, so the first thing you need to do is you need to divide this up. What money are you going to spend in the next 5 years, and what money are you going to spend after 5 years? And I mean, if there's any possibility of you spending in the next 5 years, unfortunately, it just needs to go to a bank account. Have a look at the deposit rates and some of the papers on Thursdays and Fridays, depending on which paper you read and which one has the business section. I think the CCPC actually has a website. On their website has deposit rates as well. So if you're going to spend, or if there's a chance you're going to spend the money in the next 5 years, well, then it just needs to go into a bank account and just get the best one you can. And then if you're not going to spend in the next 5 years, it's back to what I said a minute ago: 60-40 portfolio. Invest and forget, and let the money sit there, and over time it will make you money if you leave it alone. So that's it for this week. We will be back for Facebook Live this time next week, and thanks very much for all your questions.